Hey everybody, Pastor Colie here, and I am talking today with Amanda Heinsohn. Amanda is a youth of our own church, or was a youth in our own church, rather. Now is graduated and living in Madison, Wisconsin. Graduated from the university there about 3 years ago. And one of the things that she has done there is spent some time working at the University Geology Museum teaching people about space and all things astrological. So I invited her to come talk with us today to shed some light on this conversation that God has with Abraham. So thank you for joining us, Amanda.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for inviting me. It's rather fun.
So, our scripture for this Sunday is Abraham having a conversation with God. It comes from Genesis chapter 15. And God has promised to Abraham that he will have children and descendants, but Abraham and Sarah, his wife, do not have any children yet. So, Abraham, over time, gets increasingly frustrated and anxious as he's waiting for this promise to be fulfilled. And in our story for this week, God takes Abraham out to look at the night sky and says, "Count the stars if you can. That's how many children you're going to have." So, thinking about stars and the sky and all that, Amanda, can you tell us like how God says count the stars? How many stars are there?
That's it's a very big question. So if we think about what you would see in the night sky on an average night, if you're out in the desert, no light pollution, you're not being affected by anything, you could see upwards of 5,000 stars in the night sky, just with your eyes, without any visual aids or anything. Um, in present day, though, it might be a little different. If we're up on church, for example, up on the hills, turn off all the parking lights, we'd see about half of that. So maybe about 2,500 stars approximately, if you really were sitting there and counting them all, which would take forever. Um, but sometimes I find an easier way to think about stars, because those numbers are pretty big, is to kind of put a nice visual to it and narrow it down. So if we think about the stars we could see as grains of sand, all the stars we would see in the night sky would fit in a thimble if they were grains of sand, so about the size of your thumb. But then you think about where we are in our universe. We're in a galaxy called the Milky Way that has, 200 billion stars just in the galaxy. Um, and so those stars, if you could think of those as grains of sand, would fit in a wheelbarrow. So a little bit bigger, not too much, but a little bit bigger. And then you zoom out even further and you think about all those stars that are all over in our galaxies, all across the universe. Uh, that's even harder to measure, because that's a number we can't even comprehend. But you could think of them as if you filled up boxcars in a train, and you filled it all the way up to the top, and you sat there and you were going to count each boxcar as it went past. You'd have to sit there counting each boxcar going past one a second for 24 hours a day for 3 years before even coming close to coming up with all of those stars
Yeah,
that you would,
because that's
you would come
not
across.
like the stars aren't the boxcars, right? The stars are the grains of
The little great,
sand
yes,
filling up those boxcars. That is a lot.
exactly. It's kind of overwhelming. It's a number we really don't have a good hold on. So yeah, Abraham might maybe would have seen two thimbles, so two thumbs worth of stars in his sky.
Wow. So when we look at the sky, we see stars, but we can see other things, right? What are some of the other things that we can see when we look at the sky?
So when we look at the sky, we see stars, and they're going to twinkle a little bit. Um, and we also see planets. Those are going to look a little different than the stars that we see. They'll be pretty steady. They don't really twinkle much, and that has to do with because they're closer to us than all the stars. All the stars are further out in our solar system. Planets are closer. Um, you might see some satellites, something that we humans have put up in the sky. You might even see some airplanes, depending on what's going past you during the night. Oh, and sometimes, depending on the time of year, you might see a meteor shower or two as well, kind of looking like shooting stars coming across your sky. Yeah.
So you mentioned the difference between the stars and the planets. That stars will have a little bit of a twinkle to them because they're farther away.
Kind of shimmer.
Are there other ways to tell the differences between stars and satellites or any other things that we might see?
Yeah. So both planets and satellites are going to be very steady lights, but the satellites will move. You'll be able to see them kind of fade in to the night sky and then slowly fade out. Depending on where you're looking, they could be going north, south, east, west. They're going all over the place, but they move. They will look different than an airplane because an airplane is going to have those lights that flash. The satellites are so far up in our atmosphere, we can't see them blink and flash if they have any of those. So they'll just fade in and out. One planet that's really easy to see if you can see colors is Mars. Mars is actually going to look kind of orange, and you will see very distinctly that it is a different color than everything else in the night sky if you can see the color orange. If you're colorblind, maybe not so much. I've come to realize not everyone can see that vibrant orange that some people can see. But it's still going to be brighter, I guess. And it's usually depending on where the sun is coming in. Oh, you can see the moon, of course, a lot of the time as well. I forgot the biggest object in our night sky. And that's, depending on what phase it's in.
Mm-hmm. So, and Venus, you can sometimes see Venus, right? And it's kind of yellowy
Yes.
a little bit. Is that right?
Yeah, it can be kind of yellowy. Yeah, it's sometimes it's really easy to see right before evening time. Right now in our season though, you'll actually see it right before the sunrise, and that'll last for a few months. So if you got up at like 4 a.m, around there, you could start to see this really bright thing rise before the sun came up, and that would be Venus. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, good question.
So Abraham, when he was looking at the night sky, that was, it would have been some 4,000 years ago, something like that. And also on the other side of the world, right, in what we would now call the Middle East. So would Abraham see the same things in the sky and view it the same way as we do now, or would it have been different for him?
It's a tricky question because for the most part, the sky stays the same in terms of thousands of years. So 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, things would have shifted very minimally. For those of us who don't use stars to navigate, we wouldn't notice a difference. Abraham, though, he maybe was using those stars to figure out where to go, finding the North Star and following that to go north. And 3,000 to 4,000 years ago to now, the North Star has shifted a tiny bit, just a couple degrees, maybe like, I don't know, a couple inches or something in the sky. So we wouldn't be able to tell that, but he maybe would have noticed a slight shift. And if he used it to go north, he maybe would be a little off of his destination. And something else to think about, he was in the middle of the desert, no lights at all. Not that there were much to have a light pollution back then anyway. But these days we have big towns and lots of things giving off light that shines in our sky that makes the sky duller for us to see. So if he were to come to our town, for example, and stand up at the top of church, he would notice things look a lot different, just because he couldn't see most of the stars that he's used to seeing.
So this week there was some new news out about Venus, that they've found something on Venus that for star people and sciencey types seems pretty exciting. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what they found and what it means?
Yeah. So they have found this chemical called phosphine, which we can make, and it can form here on Earth. It forms on other planets, usually the big gas giants way out in our solar system. Um, but the reason this chemical was so interesting was it was in Venus's atmosphere for long enough to be recorded. So when we send, pictures to say, hey, we want to look at this area for a certain amount of time, we don't always catch everything that we want to catch. So the fact that this chemical stayed around long enough for us to take a picture of it, record it, and do that twice with two different instruments is very interesting. And also, this chemical is not stable here on Earth. So the only reason we know for it to be as abundant and be as prominent as it was in those recordings is for some kind of life potentially to be causing that. That's one explanation, and the life that they're talking about is going to be very minuscule. We're just talking about like microbial little tiny things that we can't see. Um, and that would be up in the clouds, which is rather interesting. That's not usually where we think of life being here on Earth. But it could also have a different explanation we just don't understand yet. Just because we can't make it here on Earth with the chemical or geologic activity that's happening here doesn't mean that Venus can't. It just means we don't understand why that occurred for so long. And they actually observed this 2 to 3 years ago. And they've been doing experiments, running tests, and trying to understand this before releasing it to the public to really make sure they're giving out as much or as correct information for years and decades, and sending things hopefully out there to kind of try to register what that even means. Either way, it's something new, and that's really exciting. It maybe it is life, and that would cause a whole bunch more questions to be answered, and it just spirals out of control. But even if it's just scientific, like rocks making something happen, or the clouds coming together in a certain way, or gases reacting, that's still something interesting and something we don't understand. So it's definitely something interesting to go and study, no matter what actually is the cause.
Yeah.
Something new. Yeah.
Yeah, and just for me anyway, helps me appreciate, some of the wonder and amazement
Yeah.
of God's creation, which we think about when we look around at, trees and other nature things here on Earth, but we can also think about, when we look up at space, and there's, it's just vast and awesome, and so much that we don't know or don't understand, and and it's so much bigger than us, and yet we are a part of it, so it's very cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of amazing to be part of this whatever this is. This fun thing that God's created and put together. It's just kind of, yeah, amazing and brilliant
Yeah.
and wonderful.
Cool.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add, or anything else you think we should know about space or stars?
I don't know. I guess if anyone has any questions about like what they're seeing in the night sky, the internet is a wonderful resource. NASA specifically has wonderful websites that you type in your question and something will come up. Um, if you're looking for a certain satellite, usually the easiest one to see is the International Space Station. And there are specific websites dedicated to telling you what time you can go out and look. Um, my dad and I would spend hours over my childhood and into adulthood going out and looking and saying, oh, okay, it's going to show up in like 5 minutes. Let's see if we can find it and figure out where it is. Or what is that thing that we're looking at? Is it a star? Is it a planet? There's answers. You can find it. You just got to type in questions, or send an email or a message, and we can try and figure it out together.
And I've heard there's apps that you can get, like, for your phone, right? That you could open the app and just like point it up at stuff, and it'll tell you
Hold it
what
up.
it is you're looking at.
Yes, those exist. I don't know much about them. My phone's a little older, so I don't have the ability to have it, but I've seen other people use it, and it is an amazing thing that we can do. It's just kind of incomprehensible for me to be able to think that we can just do that. Hold up an iPad or a phone and it'll tell you. It's just amazing. that's now part of the public.
Yeah. You said in the span of 3 or 4 thousand years, that's not much as far as movement of the sky is concerned. And it just made me think, like, we think of that as like so long ago, and so many things obviously that have happened in like the history of the world in 4,000 years, and yet in the time frame of the night sky and in the universe, like, that's nothing.
It's just a blink. Yeah, you'd have to be about 100,000 years out to really start to see some changes. Um, it's and that's a huge number. Another number we can't comprehend very well. What was going on back on Earth back then is it's hard to know. There aren't any written records, right, of what was going on back then, so it's hard to know exactly what was happening, what the night sky looked like. But they think it would have been different. The scientists and astronomers think it would have looked different then.
Yeah.
But yeah, three
Yeah.
to 4,000 years, just a blink.
Yeah. It also blows my mind to think about, with how far away the stars are, that what we're seeing is the stars thousands of years ago, right?
Yes.
That it takes the light so long to travel here, that actually right now, like, I don't know, they could all be burned out. I mean,
Yeah,
realistically, no, but like theoretically they could, and we wouldn't
So,
know
yeah.
for thousands of years, because that's how long it takes the light to travel to us.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like,
And that's why I was saying, like, 100,000 years ago, maybe would have looked different, or 100,000 years in the future, maybe it would look different, because some stars wouldn't be there. They would have shifted, depending on how far away they are. If they're a little bit closer, they'll shift more. Further away, they'll shift not as far. um, but yeah, to think about what's not there, new stars that are being formed that we don't even know about, it's just amazing.
yeah.
Something new every day for the astronomy world. Warm thoughts and hugs to everyone in Two Rivers. It's just amazing what you've been able to do, and I hope you're able to figure out what that path looks like going forward.